Until the 19th century, Alaska was under the control of Tsardom Russia. Although Alaska was considered an important and wealthy region for Russia, but in 1867, a shocking piece of news spread. Tsarist Russia had sold the vast territory of Alaska for a very low price to a young and newly established country called the United States of America. This is known as one of the worst deals in history. But what made Russia take such a historic decision? With an area of 1,717,000 square kilometers, Alaska is one of the largest U.S. states, and therefore rich in natural resources, including various types of mines, vast forests capable of large-scale timber production, gold mines, and most importantly, enormous reserves of oil and gas. In the 16th century, Russia was expanding and conquering lands toward the east. In 1581, Siberia was completely conquered by the Russians, and they reached its easternmost point, the Bering Strait, but decided not to advance further and stopped there. Several years later, in the 18th century, after Russia had consolidated its conquered territories, it decided to move into the Alaska region. Finally, in 1741, Russian forces entered Alaska, and the region was added to the Russian Empire. After entering Alaska, the Russians encountered an abundance of furry animals such as bears, wolves, foxes, and sea otters. Because fur was highly valuable and widely used in Russia's cold winters, this led to a rush of hunters and fur traders heading to the region. But Alaska had one major problem. In addition to the great distance between Alaska in the east and the Russian capital, St. Petersburg in the west, the northern cold made things even worse, making travel from St. Petersburg to Alaska extremely difficult. Therefore, during the reign of Tsar Alexander II, he realized that this territory was not profitable. In fact, it was costing Russia money. In the 1850s, during the Crimean War, Russia faced severe economic and military crises and realized that maintaining distant territories was extremely difficult. At that time, Alaska had become an indefensible region for Russia, and concerns were rising that it might be seized by Britain or Spain. Since Britain was approaching from eastern North America and Spain from the south. So Russian officials decided that instead of losing this land to war, it would be wiser to sell it to a neutral country. Interestingly, Americans already had experience buying land. About 60 years before the Alaska Purchase, the United States had bought an enormous area, which now includes about 15 U.S. states, from France for $15 million. After buying that land from France, the Americans wanted to have a coastline on the Pacific Ocean as well. Since the western territories of North America were under Spanish control, the U.S. made several offers to buy land from Spain, but the Spaniards rejected them. Eventually, in 1836, with the outbreak of the Spanish-American War, the United States added those territories to its domain. When American officials learned that Russia intended to sell Alaska, they acted quickly. Here, one man's role became crucial: Edward de Stuckel, the Russian ambassador in Washington. He had already built a good relationship with the Americans and knew that the U.S. Secretary of State, William Seward, was passionate about expanding U.S. territory. Stuckel cleverly avoided directly proposing the sale. Instead, he subtly spread the idea in Washington's political circles that Russia had no real interest in keeping Alaska. That was exactly what Seward wanted to hear. He believed the United States should expand as much as possible. Finally, in March 1867, Stuckel and Seward sat at the same table and began negotiations. The Russians initially asked for $10 million, but Seward managed to reduce the price to $7.2 million. At midnight on March 30th, 1867, the final agreement between Russian and American representatives was signed. Steckel happily sent a telegraph to Russia announcing that the deal was done, and the Tsar rewarded him generously. When the news of the deal broke, many people in Congress and the media mocked it. At that time, the deal was called Seward's Folly, or Seward's Icebox, because people thought money had been wasted on a frozen wasteland. Finally, on April 9, 1867, the U.S. Senate approved the treaty with 37 votes in favor and 4 against. The American flag was raised in Alaska, and the United States officially became its owner. With the discovery of gold in the late 19th century and later oil and gas in the 20th century, the strategic and economic value of Alaska became clear.